One moment. Here we go. Okay. Hello, everyone, and happy Sabbath. The title of my study is Heaven is Cheap Enough. This study was inspired by Elder Parmenter's most recent studies, as well as his studies in Portugal several years back. I originally planned to present this study in one time slot, but ended up breaking it into two parts. So I'll be presenting part one today and part two the next time I'm scheduled to teach. So with that said, this is an interactive study and I encourage everyone's participation. So please share your comments and thoughts and questions. And it's hard for me to read the chat while presenting, so if someone can read them out loud, that would be great. And also if someone can give me a 10-minute heads up when it's for me to close. Thank you. Okay. So I want to begin this study by marking where we are on the 144,000 line. So can someone say where we are in Earth's history?
We are between 11.5 and increase of knowledge.
Okay. So we're right here.
Yes.
Okay. And what do we call this dispensation or period?
Harvest.
We call this the harvest on the 144,000 line?
The latter rain.
Yes, the latter rain. But also, we know that um, this is the Sunday law waymark right here. And so throughout until the close of probation is considered the Sunday law period, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're in the Sunday law dispensation, or I'll put Sunday law period. Oops. Okay. Thank you. So let's continue. And so what's our goal? Anyone? What's our goal, or what's your goal in this movement?
To be saved.
To be saved? Anyone else?
To have God's character.
To have God's character. Okay.
Make it to heaven.
Yeah, make it to heaven. So I believe, or at least my goal is to um make it to heaven. Um, and so as in the words of Ellen White, we have a heaven to win and a hell to shun. And Ellen White states this phrase multiple times throughout her writings in slightly different ways. For example, in First Selected Messages 96.1, she states, every soul has a heaven to win and a hell to shun. And in Our High Calling 163.4, she states, we have a crown of eternal life to win, a hell to shun. So I see this as simply a repeat and enlarge. Heaven, or we can say eternal life, is something to win or to gain, a goal to achieve. Do we all agree?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what do you imagine? Oh, sorry, I skipped. If someone can read this quote, sorry, if someone can read this quote, please.
I'll read it,
Okay,
Victoria. Good
thank
morning.
you. Good morning.
So that's 4B, SG Spiritual Gifts, Volume 4B, 127.2. I was shown the saints' reward, the immortal inheritance, and saw that those who had endured the most for the truth's sake will not think they have had a hard time, but will count heaven cheap enough.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're all eager to get to heaven, right? As the song goes, when we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. But I wonder for how many of us would this still ring true if we knew what heaven would be like. So what do you imagine heaven to be like? And you can share, prior to being in the movement, what you thought heaven would be like to you. Or even now, what do you imagine heaven to be like? You have any thoughts?
That there wouldn't be any hunger. Everyone would be given whatever they need, for shelter and food. That we would be treated equally when it came to resources. That there
Okay,
wouldn't be
so
that type of financial hierarchy.
okay, so treated equally and
Things would never die.
things will never die. And resources.
No adversary.
Is provided. Things will never die. So no death and no adversary.
No illness.
What right? Oops. Very. I think I spelled that wrong.
An E instead of an A.
Okay.
VE, I believe, versary.
Oh,
I think that
adversary. Okay. And what was the other one?
No illness.
No illness. Okay. And one more. Anyone?
Relationships.
Relationships. Okay. Good answers. Okay. We have a pretty mature imagination of heaven. But
Ava's added one in the chat. Never
oh yeah.
sleep because you can't get tired.
Okay. Never sleep. So never sleep. Okay. Thank you. So what is the method by which we are to teach? Anyone?
Parables.
Parables, right. And what are parables?
Simplified model of something more complicated.
Okay, a simplified model of something more complicated. Okay, yes, I agree. Can someone provide a simpler answer? I mean, that is a simple answer, but just
stories.
stories. Okay, a story.
Examples of things around us that would help us remember the lesson.
Okay, examples of things around us. Right. So a parable can be stories, anything and everything we are familiar with and know about that can be used to teach us about something that we aren't familiar with and we don't know about. So they're basically stories, as we mentioned, and things we're familiar with. and know about. So I'm just going to leave it as stories here, but we get the point of what a parable is. And so for my study, I'm going to be looking at two types of parables. And sorry, okay. To understand what heaven is like. So using the spirit, literal and spiritual, and Alpha and Omega. And so we get the model or framework of literal and spiritual from the verse 1 Corinthians 15, verse 46, which states, "Howbeit that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterward that which is spiritual." So can someone explain how we use the model of literal and spiritual?
You have to understand the literal first
Mm-hmm.
in order to understand the spiritual application.
Right. So we look at something natural or literal to understand, to know or understand something that is spiritual, right? And so we get the model of Alpha and Omega from the verse Isaiah 46, verse 10, which states, "Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure." So can someone explain how we use Alpha and Omega?
Alpha would be the literal, Omega spiritual.
Not quite. Someone else want to chime in on how we use the model of Alpha and Omega?
In a sense, I see it like a chiastic structure in biblical texts or whatever story you're studying. And if it's a dispensation of history, you look at the past to understand the present. So you look at the beginning to understand the end.
Yeah. So we look at history to know what the future will be like, or even our present context. But yeah, we look at the past to know what the end will look like. Okay. So any questions or thoughts or comments? No? Okay. So I'll start with the literal and spiritual model. In Matthew 13, it reads that Christ used parables to teach the people about the kingdom of heaven. Does anyone know at the top of their heads the parables used to explain what heaven is like? I'm asking for 5 comparisons mentioned in Matthew 13. Anyone want to give a try? Or even if you look it up now, if you want to share.
One like a mustard seed?
Yeah.
I think the parable of the net is in that
Yes.
also.
Annette?
Finding treasure in a field.
Yeah, hidden treasure.
Sower in the seed.
That's one, but I'm not looking for that one. But that is one in Matthew 13.
Looking at Matthew 13, the 10 virgins, the kingdom of heaven looks like 10 virgins.
Okay.
Is it not 25?
Sorry?
Is that not Matthew 25? for the 10 virgins.
Yes, it's Matthew 25.
Not
Yes.
not 13.
So you were only looking at chapter 13?
Yes,
Okay, okay. Sorry.
it's okay.
How about that pearl of great price?
Yeah, fine pearls. And the last one more.
Parable of the weeds, the tares.
No, not the wheat and
No.
tears. That's not what I'm looking for.
Leavening in there too.
Yeah. Leaven, or we could say yeast. Okay, thank you. So, okay. So the Jews were familiar with the fine pearls, hidden treasure, leaven, a net, and mustard seeds. These were common literal things that they could see and had some knowledge about through their day-to-day activities on earth. Christ used literal or earthly things to teach them about spiritual or heavenly things. So, like Christ, we can use things on earth that which we can see to understand things in heaven that which we cannot see. So, to gain insight about heaven, what heaven will be like, I want to use relationships as an example. Question: what makes up relationships? Anyone?
You mean like husband and wife?
You can say husband and wife. Anyone else?
Children,
Children? Okay.
Friends.
Children, friends.
Siblings?
Okay. We're already filling out the next part, but that's cool. Friends and siblings. Anyone else?
Church.
Church,
Master and slave.
master and slave. Church and master.
Oh, you filled them in.
Oops. Oh crap. Sorry. Sorry. No. Alrighty. Master and slave. And did you say something else, Susan?
Sorry, I muted myself. I was thinking about what Elder Parmenter when he first taught us about relationships, right? Like parent and child and
Uh-oh. I can't hear you, Susan.
you can't hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Victoria.
Okay.
I was thinking about Elder Parmenter and what he originally taught us in the relationship structures, right?
Mhm.
And like parents and children, and I wasn't sure if that's what you were going for or not.
Well, those are good answers. And actually, for this part, I was just expecting answers, but I was going to get to that in a later part of the slide. But basically, the simple answer that I was looking for is people, and children are considered people, friends are considered people. So all of these answers are correct, but I was just looking simply for people. So we know that heaven will be composed of beings, God and their creations. And as we already began to list, I was just going to go into what are the 5 types of relationships. So, I see someone mentioned husband and wife, so I can put marriage, and someone else mentioned sibling, and also we have parent-child. And we have someone mentioned master and slave. Is it okay if I put boss, employee? Similar. And friends. All right. So these relationships we have on earth teaches us essentially about God, but also about ourselves and each other. We know that the test is all about the six, how we treat people, how we treat each other on earth, or rather in this movement, gives us a glimpse of what heaven will be like. It will be one humongous family in heaven. The only thing, as someone mentioned before, I think it was Penny, the only thing we'll take to heaven is our character, the inner you, your thoughts, feelings, behavior, biases, sexuality, everything that makes up our character, who we are. And our character influences our relationships, how we interact with each other or relate to one another.
I believe,
Any,
sorry.
yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
when you were talking about that, I was just remembering, I believe Ellen White talks about being able to keep our personalities. And I used to think of that differently, but now I see that our personalities are composed of our character, right? And yeah,
Right.
because
Any
we
other?
recognize one another. She
One more
writes.
time. Sorry.
Maybe
I
it's
interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I wasn't sure if you could hear me or not. I think I'm having difficulty with connection, but she mentions, that we'll recognize one another there. So what is it we'll recognize, right? I think about.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else want to share any thoughts, comments? So the next model I'll be using to understand what heaven will be like is Alpha and Omega. So to know what heaven will be like at the end or when we get there is to have an understanding of what it was like at the beginning. Simply put, heaven at the end will be similar to what it was like at the beginning. The only difference is that Lucifer, the fallen angels, and the wicked will not be there. Can someone read this quote, please?
I'll read it for you.
Thank you.
The law of love being the foundation of the government of God, the happiness of all intelligent beings depends upon their perfect accord with its great principles of righteousness. God desires from all their creatures the service of love, service that springs from an appreciation of God's character. God takes no pleasure in a forced obedience, and to all God grants freedom of will that they may render them voluntary service.
You want to continue?
Okay. So long as all created beings acknowledged the allegiance of love, there was perfect harmony throughout the universe of God. It was the joy of the heavenly host to fulfill the purpose of their Creator. They delighted in reflecting God's glory and showing forth their praise. And while love to God was supreme, love for one another was confiding and unselfish. There was no note of discord to mar the celestial harmonies.
Thank you.
I love
think
that part,
okay.
confiding too, because you have to have great trust in who you confide with, especially in this life. And the fact that we can love one another so much and have that trust in heaven will just be awesome.
Yeah. I think this is also a depiction of what it was like on earth before even Adam sinned. Oh, and while love to God was supreme, Eve's and Adam's love for each other, that confiding and unselfish. They experienced heaven on earth, though it is unfortunate that it was for a short span of time, because it wasn't long before sin inhabited the earth. Can I have someone read this quote?
I'll read. But a change came over this happy state. There was one who perverted the freedom that God had granted to their creatures. Sin originated with them who, next to Christ, had been most honored of God and was highest in power and glory among the inhabitants of heaven. Lucifer, son of the morning, was first of the covering cherubs, holy and undefiled. Lucifer stood in the presence of the great Creator, and thus ceaseless beams of glory enshrouding the eternal God rested upon them. Thus saith the Lord, thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom, and perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. Ezekiel 28:12-15.
Thank you. So sin originated with Lucifer in heaven. Lucifer and Christ were equals and had always been. Lucifer, next to Christ, a high and exalted angel, saw Christ as no different from them in rank, an angel at their level. So, to make a long story short, God tells Christ to come into a secret meeting, and Lucifer gets jealous, rebels, and a war breaks out. And all this occurred in heaven. Love no longer reigned supreme in Lucifer's heart. No longer did Lucifer abide by the law of love. This was the change that came over this happy state.
May I make a brief comment?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
You know, I really think about that a lot, and how the exterior of Lucifer detracted so much, in a sense, that it was magnified. If you're following what I'm trying to say, where the internal character, the humility of the internal character seemed overshadowed, so to speak. The real value was the internal, right? But because Lucifer's external was so glorious, it brought all the attention and admiration. And you think about that even on the simplest examples in this world, and you can see how people are drawn to the external attributes more than the internal attributes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Can someone read this next quote, please?
Fails test and rebels. Boy, come on, people.
Jackie, is that you?
I'll read.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Lucifer was envious and jealous of Jesus Christ. Yet, when all the angels bowed to Jesus to acknowledge their supremacy and high authority and rightful rule, Lucifer bowed with them. But their heart was filled with envy and hatred. Christ had been taken into the special counsel of God in regard to their plans, while Lucifer was unacquainted with them. Lucifer did not understand, neither was Lucifer permitted to know the purposes of God. But Christ was acknowledged sovereign and of heaven, their power and authority to be the same as that of God. Lucifer thought that they were a favorite in heaven among the angels.
Thank you. So it was like Lucifer threw a massive tantrum and had a huge meltdown. Lucifer was like, no, that's my place. I want to be the most high. In their mind, they were next to God and had a high position too. Lucifer saw themselves as above all the angels. They thought they were the favorite and sought higher exaltation. Who was Christ to be honored before me? And when God lifted up and honored Christ, showing all in heaven who the boss is, it was like Lucifer got a reality check all at once, and their world came spiraling down. So
Hey,
Lucifer, yeah,
Hi, Victoria. It's Kathy McGraw. I have a question.
sure.
I'm not following. Are you giving Lucifer a plural? Let's see. Maybe I let's see. Christ had taken. Wait a minute. Oh, Lucifer bowed with them, but their heart. Are you referring? Who's there?
Lucifer,
So that's plural instead of saying. Or are you just trying to avoid the gendered role?
right. Avoid the
Gotcha.
gender.
Okay, I just wanted clarity on that. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so Lucifer compared themselves to Christ and saw themselves as superior and could not accept Christ as their boss. All right. So any thoughts, questions, or comments so far? So I do. Oh
I have
yeah,
a
go ahead.
comment.
Okay.
Well, on the previous subject, you were talking about heaven,
Mhm.
and then this one you're talking about Lucifer and the fall,
Mhm.
and I see the dissension in heaven, and heaven will be without this dissension, and without all this turmoil and craziness that went on, and so it makes heaven a little clearer that we won't have this kind of thing in heaven. And we'll have the connection. We'll have the connection with God restored, and so it makes for a more peaceful heaven. And you know, I don't know if I made sense or not, but
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying that without Lucifer there, it will be less chaotic.
yeah, without that type of behavior, that's splitting heaven in two, kind of thing. Harmony, yeah, that's it. That's a good word.
Okay.
Harmony restored in heaven.
I think Elder Parmenter has tried to pop that bubble.
Yeah. And so as we continue, that bubble will be popped.
Okay.
So, I had a thought, which is I think it's so interesting how Lucifer had a similar test to our own, and also that the 144,000 will be the closest to God next to Christ, God's counterpart, and we know or that there will not be a repeat of Lucifer's rebellious behavior in heaven. So I did want to throw those points out there, if anyone agrees or disagrees.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was going to
sorry.
add something. I mean, like within that quote, you can see that uh, Lucifer, like, did not even try to learn who is that person, who is that being exalted. But
Mhm.
the reaction was just to, no, this can happen. But if you could have like asked God, like, hey, who is this person? Who is this being? Why is this being put that way? Like to humble themselves to learn about Christ. I think just imagine, maybe I think they could, I don't know, they could have maybe understand who Christ was, or maybe they could have not rebelled. I don't know. But because of lack of knowledge, you can see that it just went straight to like fighting or rebelling against God.
To
But we are here to learn, so whatever we don't know, we try to learn instead of just reacting to it without having knowledge about it.
Yeah, while Emmanuel was talking, I was thinking about equality again, you know, and heaven. And if heaven, if that was the foundation of heaven and everybody treated the same, you could actually see how, in Lucifer's mind, Christ was being elevated higher than everybody else's position, which would, in one sense, look like it is undoing equality. Right? If someone has more power.
And I would say like it was the right place for Christ, but Lucifer has no idea of that. So you can see from from Lucifer's perspective, it seems like inequality.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, Emmanuel.
So Lucifer was, oh yeah, go ahead.
But in spite of that, there were 2/3 of the angels that did not have that misconception.
Right.
And then Lucifer had it in his mind, and then he created alliances and had schemes and deception to gather others around him. You know, we know the whole story of, the deception that he did and his gaslighting and all that stuff. And he did have an opportunity to repent, and he didn't do it.
Right.
Kathy, wasn't it until the cross, though, that even the ones that stayed in heaven, it was the cross that really finalized where Lucifer's actions would, from cause to effect, where it would actually go?
I don't think it was that far, because the boar was in heaven and he was cast out. And the reason Lucifer wasn't killed was to see how far his deception would go. But I thought this was brought up some other time about that it was at the cross, but somebody said it was sooner than the cross, and I can't remember now. Because let me see. I don't remember. I had to do something about, oh, well, there was a plan before the cross, yes, but the angels weren't aware of that one. So, yes, it could be that they were totally convinced then at the cross, but they were going by, how did they know to stay with God in the meantime? I mean, they pleaded with Lucifer. They said, look, we know this, and we've seen this. We know how Christ is, la da da. You know what I mean? There was still plenty of evidence within the heavens, but I think, help me, yeah, my memory's vague. God purposed, he wanted the plot or Lucifer's government to go to its extreme, like you say.
Yeah,
and
thank
then,
you.
Yeah, so
I'm just checking my memory too, Kathy. Mine's not that great anymore. Thank
I
you.
know it's just so sad, but we got each other, so cool.
Yeah, so I'm depending on it.
Okay. Thanks for your help, Susan.
All right. So Lucifer was hurt and felt attacked, or felt as though their position was threatened. Lucifer was infuriated by all that transpired. First, God invites Christ to a secret meeting without Lucifer. Second, Christ was honored by God before all the heavenly hosts as a superior being to be worshipped. And third, according to Lucifer, God had a favorite that wasn't thin. All this wounded Lucifer, and Lucifer decided to rebel. My question is, was Lucifer's rebellion an act of self-defense? Anyone?
That's a good question.
No.
For his ego, maybe.
It is one thing to assume something that, hey, that one is being favored. Then also it's another thing to say, oh, this is the fact about this person. It seemed like Lucifer was assuming that, oh, this person is being, why is it being the favorite one and not her, like something like that. Oh, people.
Victoria, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I didn't understand it.
Will there be self-defense in heaven? Was Lucifer's behavior an act of self-defense? They were hurt, wounded by what God did in honoring Christ. And I'm wondering if Lucifer's hurt was an act of self-defense.
Victoria,
Yes.
it doesn't seem to me that he acted in self-defense, because you defend yourself when you're being harmed or when you're being hurt. Yes, he was hurt, but he was not targeted or harmed. Like he wasn't, being targeted by Jesus or being targeted by God. He felt hurt. It was a feeling that he had.
Pride.
And pride. Renee just said pride. I think his pride was hurt. And so it doesn't, to me, that's not self-defense.
Okay, so if you're hurt, you got your feelings hurt, do you lash out?
Yeah, that's not lashing out is not defending yourself. That's because self-defense is it's defensive. You're defending, you're not lashing out, you're not moving forward, you're defending yourself, you're standing your ground and you're trying to defend yourself from whatever harm that may come towards you. He's actually being proactive in conspiring. That's not self-defense. That's just I don't know. Does anybody have any input in that?
I think it's a fascinating question. And I can see what you're saying, Donna and Renee, but I can also see, I think, what Victoria might have been alluding to, which goes to the fast brain, slow brain, and that what fell was our emotions, how we process, right? Wasn't that what was ruined by sin? Because our reasoning ability was kept intact. We could still reason, but it was the lower passions that fell. And so thinking about that, because people say, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But we know that's not true. We know that words and things said, and like thinking of Lucifer and feeling like everything is equal. I'm just playing the devil's advocate in a sense, trying to just talk it out, But like maybe he was sensing, but I do believe it goes to pride. Yes. But wasn't he protecting that? So it wasn't it might have been what do you call that? I can't think of the right word. Misguided self-defense, but in a sense he was defending his persona and how he saw and viewed himself.
I agree. Susan?
Let me explain my thoughts here, and then others can agree or disagree.
Add one thing before you add your thought.
I'm sorry?
Can I add one more thing before you add your thought?
Sure, go ahead.
So when you use like parable, like the spiritual, literal to the spiritual. Like, let me just put it in the way that employee and the employer. So you have been the working employee for like 4 years, like the hard working, and the boss know you that hey, you are the one who is doing a lot of things. And then the boss come and bring someone you don't actually know that they have done a lot of work, and then put them in a position that maybe you were eyeing that hey, at the end of the year I'm going to be put in that position, and then boss brings somebody in. How will you feel about that? So that's the way I see like the way Lucifer fell in heaven. So seeing that the boss brought somebody who he doesn't even know, I have no idea, haven't seen him doing the work and all kind of things, because he was the one called the beauty and everything. He was like the one shining the light in heaven, and seeing that person also brought to that position like, oh, there was something that I don't know about this person. So who is this guy? And then like somebody just like lash out and stuff like that. You can see that kind of feeling from a human perspective. I don't know about heaven, but I can see that from a human point of view.
Thank
Hey,
you for
Victoria,
sharing.
Phil
Yeah.
has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, perception is reality. So I believe that Lucifer was defending themselves. You take, for example, people with PTSD. There is no threat that anybody else can see, but according to that person who has that trauma, to them it's a threat, and they will act accordingly. So if they have a gun, they will shoot at what they think is their enemy. So however misguided or however iniquity entered into Lucifer, whatever that means, Lucifer's perception, the other angels try to tell him, your position has not been diminished. You're still the highest among all the angels, and they try to reason with Lucifer, but Lucifer could not see that. So whatever that means, as iniquity has entered into that was, we can see from our end that was misguided, but to that person that was real. And so I do believe that Lucifer was defending themselves. So yeah, so I would say yes.
Okay, thank you, Val. All right, so I'm gonna just state my thoughts and put them out there. The parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are protective mechanisms that were built in us by God. They are part of our nature and functioning as human beings, and I believe it will continue to operate in us in heaven. On this earth, it's very unfortunate that many of us live in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze because of experienced trauma and or abuse. Stress is caused by both internal and external factors. Much of our stress is self-generated by our own thoughts, prejudices, perceptions, and feelings. Thereby, we can potentially work ourselves up over situations that's not intended to worry, hurt, or upset us at all because of how we perceive, judge, or interpret those situations. So, do you think there will be a point where we will feel hurt, upset, offended in heaven? And will self-defense be justified?
I think that there is definitely going to be the time when we will feel hurt or feel like we were treated unfairly. But it will, well, I- I don't think it will get to the point we will feel like we will, the self-defense is justified. I mean,
Okay.
that those feelings come from the lack of knowledge, right? Just in the same way as in the case of Lucifer, where he he was defending himself, definitely, but the initial cause for for this situation that he ended up in was the beginning was the pride, but then pride triggered this whole thing, and then he had to defend his position. Even so, he probably already knew that it was an indefensible position. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to put out a example. Like, I remember someone in the movement told me, in heaven, what if somebody threw their harp at you, got so angry and frustrated and threw their harp at you? And I remember the first thought that came to my mind was, honestly, it better miss, like and I'm thinking it better not hurt, because that I would definitely know that my body would go into either fight, flight, or freeze, in that moment. And, I'm hoping that, like I wouldn't be so quick to defend myself when someone throws a harp at me. I mean, what are your thoughts? That's just an example.
Yeah, I think because of the previous histories that we will have, we will hesitate to react um, on a reflect to be reactive rather than we will probably take more time to consider than to be reactive.
It sounds like that's something we'd have to practice here now, because to think that that's how it's going to automatically be in heaven, I don't think that's going to be the case. But I do want to put out this thought that, as Elder Parmenter mentioned in one of his recent presentations, that self-defense is a tricky subject in terms, especially of abuse, because self-defense is fighting back, and in turn is perpetuating abuse.
Phil has his hand up again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So I think, I mean, of course, it's just my opinion. The what we're learning now, right? The lines dictate our behavior, right? And so yes, we are built with parasympathetic, sympathetic, slow brain, fast brain. Yes, all fight, flight, freeze, that's all inbuilt. But I think a lot of that is going to be figured out here because lines dictate our behavior. Right? So I think, I think there's going to be maybe hurt feelings in heaven, but at the same time, I don't think there's going to be such a violence that somebody's going to throw a harp at us. Because a lot of that should have been mitigated here already. And then since in heaven there's no adversary to gaslight or to egg on bad behavior, in due time also should diminish, where we shouldn't really have to defend ourselves, period. That's just my opinion.
Christine would like you, Victoria, to repeat the last sentence you said about self-defense.
Regarding what Elder Parmenter stated?
I'll let her clarify. I just want to make sure you saw she said that.
I think so. Something about I didn't catch it fast, but I caught at the end. I should have heard that. because it made sense about self-defense being one way is this and another way is that.
Yeah, that self-defense is a tricky subject in terms of abuse because self-defense is fighting back. And in turn, when you're acting out in self-defense, is perpetuating abuse. And we know abuse will is something that is just evil. So yeah, it's interesting also to think about prior dispensations before our own, being in heaven and the job function of the 144,000 to teach. It's really interesting in
Thank you.
heaven. Yeah.
If I can remember very well, there was a time Elder Pimenta throughout it, like it's like a statement, but like also a question that somebody posed to him, and then he referred it in a good way that like somebody said that there will be a point in time that we will not defend ourselves because there will be no self to defend.
Mhm.
And people were really confused about that, like how, like what does that mean? And he also just like, okay, I throw it out there for us to discuss and find out what does that mean.
Isn't self-defense, in a sense, like playing on what you're saying, Emmanuel, protection of life because you want to live? Basic, if it gets down to it, right? It's to continue living. And that is why, even for Christ, to lay down his life, and because people used to tell me that in the church all the time, in the Adventist church, you've got to die to yourself. And I really couldn't understand that. What do you mean die to myself? How do you do that? And they really had no answers. And if you think of the cross, that's what the Lord did, because he had to completely subdue all those self-defense qualities within our human makeup in order to allow that without fighting back, right? Because it's natural to fight back when your life is being threatened.
Right.
And so that just tells me that there is a way to shut that off somehow. And when we think, and also somebody mentioned we're the only ones that are getting this training, the 144,000. We know there's going to be other people who make it to heaven that don't have this training. And so we know there's going to be a lot of difficulties in heaven. It's not going to be a bed of roses, I don't think, when we first get there, because there's going to be so many things to work out. And even the scripture tells us God will finally wipe away all our tears, but we're going to cry, and we're getting the pre-training, but it doesn't end here. We know that it goes on and on. But there must come a point when God, because what about glorification too? I think about that. Will that have some component in it that finally balances us back out the way we were supposed to be pre-sin, where we're not constantly trying to battle our lower power and apply our higher power? And anyway, I don't know, there's a lot to think about, and I really appreciate this study, Victoria. It's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I think the Parmenter mentioned about the higher powers and lower powers being not a good model. Like something recently, someone can correct me or something like that. But
Yeah, in the study of the demon possession or self-determination.
yeah. But I just wanted to kind of throw that thought out there. But back to Lucifer's um Lucifer in heaven. And so what was Lucifer's problem? I know there's been a lot of discussion, so not sure if this is like at the forefront of our minds, but when you think about how Lucifer reacted and or responded, um mhm. Did someone say pride? Did I hear?
Yes, pride.
Pride. Okay. Huh. Anyone else?
There's something
Power.
about he had the wrong information. He was making assumptions of the wrong information.
Wrong information. Okay. Making assumptions. Good. Huh.
I don't believe that at his initial defending himself or themselves rather, that was sinful. I believe it's their continuation
Mm-hmm.
and persistence, then it became sin.
Thank you for that point.
So,
Ingrained, right, Troy? So it was ingrained.
so I just wanted to support that, that where he went wrong is where he needed to take his time and think through. But I think since he acted, quickly on where he was reactive, and just that, and added to it is the stubbornness, just all escalated really bad, and pride, obviously.
Okay.
But I think where he really missed on is the think it through and engage this, like what we say, slow brain.
Okay. Any others? I know there were some.
Jealousy.
Oh,
Carol's
go ahead.
hands back up.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, Carol too, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jealousy.
Jealousy? Okay.
My question is, when Lucifer saw that Christ was being elevated,
Mm-hmm.
is there any spirit of prophecy, any quotes or saying, or Ellen White stating that did Lucifer ever go to the Father and ask the Father why?
No.
No. So he just assumed something, because the two scriptures that come to my mind is Moses pleading with Christ to let him enter into Canaan. And after so much pleading, Moses gave up and said, okay, I accept your decision. And also with David pleading for his son to live. And when his son died, he accepted. So in other words, they didn't keep arguing. They argued up to a point. And when finally the decision was said, no, this is final, then they accepted and they went back to their humble ways.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Lucifer, that's why I was wondering, did he ever go to the Father and plead with the Father? Why him? Why not me? Why don't I get to do this? And I guess in my mind, then, if the answer is no, he never went to the Father to ask. Perhaps he didn't know the Father well enough, and he just made an assumption. Even though the other angels realized that Lucifer's position was no way diminished, that he still had the same authority. In Lucifer's mind, he didn't know the Father well enough to go and ask. And therefore, he just automatically thought Father Christ bad. They were bad. He is good. He is right. And therefore, he's just going to rebel. So that rebellious spirit, so the so it's not asking. The part of asking is not the bad part, because he didn't even do that. Like Moses and David, he just assumed and went with his wrong perception and thought himself right and rebelled and continued in that vein.
Lana, I see your hand, but I want to comment on that real quick. What Bella just said, because Lucifer was close to God, next to Christ. So Lucifer had some knowledge of God, of who God is. And it's not saying that Lucifer knew everything about God. I think because even we will still be learning things. I mean, there's things that we still when we get to heaven, hopefully get to heaven, we'll not know about God, I think. So but I think that Lucifer has some knowledge to know that God God's intentions were not to hurt them. But Lucifer went by, what they saw, how they perceived things. And to them, it was just not fair, So, go ahead, Lana.
Yeah, I'm actually interesting that we, or at least I don't know if Lucifer had a um it says that he was the closest to he was close to God, right? But what was his act? I mean, did he actually had the direct access to God? I mean, what I'm trying to say is that if you look um like here on earth, right, we have, or at least in this movement, right? So we don't have God directly coming down in the all brightness of their person and telling us exactly how things are, and we just directly conversing with them, right? So I think it's something that would have required Lucifer. I don't know. It just seems to me that I have a question about their relationship between Lucifer and God, whether God was accessible directly, because it seems to me that, like here, we have to figure out, because we don't have God directly coming down to us and just openly speaking to us, right? It's just that we have to figure out, we look back in the history, we draw parallels, we draw compare and contrast, natural to spiritual, and that's how we make conclusions. But so I was just wondering, do we have any evidence that Lucifer had direct relationship where he could converse with God? I don't, I don't, what I'm trying to say is that it's just an interesting question to me, because I wonder if God was ever openly conversing with any of the angels, um, except Jesus.
Well, we know that Christ presented themselves as Michael the archangel. So that was and Lucifer, they only saw Christ as Michael. And it was at that point when they realized the nature of, Christ's relationship with God, that Christ is actually God. So it was like an eye-opening to all of them, and most hurtful to Lucifer, because Lucifer thought, Michael is just like me. Michael is another angel as I am, you know, and they thought, they were lifted so much in high esteem that, they were the favorite one. All of the other beings served them and listened to them, and they were highly favored, they walked in the Garden of Eden, and all of that. So um yeah, there was that. There, I kind of forgot my train of thought, so sorry. But yeah, there was that.
I have a thought.
Okay.
Um, excuse me. Is it so Lucifer's seeing everybody as equal, so then in reality he failed the test of that there's actually inequality in heaven.
Wow, that's interesting.
Can you say that one more time, Kathy? I missed it. I'm sorry.
So Lucifer's seeing everybody equal, and then things happen, and now it's not looking like there's equality for everyone, and so he fails in that he didn't recognize that there is inequality. There's a hierarchy.
I would say
Wow.
I don't think the way we're using equality is the way we are using it, right? Because like equality does not mean that there's no difference in power.
But the point was, he's upset as how come I'm not higher? Why, we're equal. How did Christ get lifted up?
But I don't think he actually saw everyone as equal. I think he saw himself
Yeah, that's true.
as better.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
because Lucifer was part of the hierarchy.
right,
Mhm.
yeah.
But
And so
he
problem,
still thought he was higher than Christ and equal with God.
Right. So he knew that there was not equality because he was within the upper echelons of the hierarchy. I think
He thought he was because he actually wasn't when that
Yeah.
private meeting, right?
yes.
I'm just going back to like 2023 when Elder Parmenter was talking about heaven, and he said something along the lines that Lucifer failed the test of inequality. He couldn't recognize it, that he wasn't equal with God.
Oh, right. Yeah, in that aspect, yes. He thought, in other words, you're saying that he actually thought he was equal with God.
Yes, and isn't that Gadol?
Yes, if you put it that way, absolutely, I agree.
Yes. Yeah, because it was when Christ was shown to be higher that he's like, well, hold on, I should be in that.
Right, right.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it's time of power, then that's but yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, we did it again together.
So it goes back to the very beginning quote that Victoria shared, or one of them anyway, where Ellen White was talking about I can't remember how she put it, but something about when iniquity was found in Lucifer. So the translation or the derivation, the meaning of iniquity literally means inequality. I thought that was interesting.
That is an interesting thought.
Eva has a hand.
Yes.
Yeah, my thought was, yeah, we mentioned inequality, but the other thing that I thought about was I am trying to remember, I hope somebody remembers presentations from Elder Tess when she talks about him and Jesus, and she does compare and contrast. Unfortunately, I don't remember all the details. However, the thought came that humbleness, like humility, you can see, I think we can all see that Jesus was humble. So even if you line them both, I can see how Lucifer wanted the honor because Jesus was getting the honor, right? So now he wanted that honor on him. So he was asking for that honor. However, what I'm looking at is that the requirement was for him to be humble, meaning he need to be I guess selfless, I don't know, whatever synonyms you can think of. And that was the test. To me, that's how I'm looking at it. Like that was a test for him. He couldn't pass that test because he had the honor. I mean, in terms of, the angels and everything, but when it came to Jesus, it's like, okay, like why is he? Because they were both beautiful, right? And everything externally, but I can see how the internal was not there. And he was fighting it because he still wanted the equality with Jesus. I hope I'm making sense, but that's what I'm thinking. He just didn't have that qualification because he wasn't willing to submit himself to that requirement. And he would have been honored, but he still couldn't get to that level. And the fact that Jesus was, after sin enters, Jesus decides that he's going to humble himself. He's going to give his life for all humanity, but it's not even just for humanity, it's for the entire universe to watch. So there you see him, and even in his humility, he was still being tested because since Jesus is God, now he had to be on planet Earth and be a human. He couldn't be like, okay, I'm going to be God, use my mighty powers on planet Earth and be a God. No, he still had to be a human being. So he still had to go through those tests. But I can see, hopefully everybody can see, like how his Jesus's character is still like, he's willing to humble himself before honor. And Lucifer was like, no, I just want the honor. I'm not going to humble. No, that's not. And then of course he decided to, conquer the other angels by questioning and this and that and all that, because I that's how I'm seeing it now. Like he was just not willing to humble himself. He had all the intelligence, he had all the knowledge, he had he knew about God's requirements, everything. But the fact that he was not willing to humble himself is what killed him. In other words, that was, his revelry was now, he can have a say, but he's not going to have his way. So now he gets kicked out of heaven. But anyhow, that's how I'm looking at it. I love this theme. I wish, we had more time. Thank you.
So, thank you. Just recapping over like some thoughts about Lucifer's problem that were put down, responded quickly and was stubborn, pride. Lucifer did not practice equality, wrong information, made assumptions. I put question mark next to Lucifer hated God, and did not love other beings in heaven. Jealousy, and the struggle to worship someone at their level, and realizing that Christ was superior. But actually, I agree with all those answers, but the answer that Elder Parmenter helped me with understanding is that Lucifer did not love themselves. Their problem was that they didn't love themselves, and it actually sounds like the ultimate self-destruction. But yeah, Lucifer didn't love themselves. And as I continue with part 2, we'll kind of dig in deeper to what that looks like. But one would think that Lucifer loved themselves because they were so puffed up and held themselves in high esteem, but they truly didn't love themselves. It seems like a simple answer, but
That's really beautiful and really deep. Victoria, because that's the lesson that God has been trying to teach me forever. And it's the exact opposite of what you think, really, right? Because, like you just said, we think that if we're loving ourselves, that's selfish. And then when you try to re-educate yourself in what that means, and how to properly love yourself, not love yourself to where it's prideful, but where you can appreciate your value as God values each of us, right? And it has nothing to do with hierarchy or positions of power. And yeah, and I have had to learn that a long, hard lesson, even like through my daughter. I realized she deserved better, but I still didn't realize I deserved better. I could always see other people deserved better, but I couldn't realize I too deserved better. And it's a process.
Thank you for sharing, Susan.
I
Any
have,
other?
I
Yeah,
have a comment if I may.
sure.
Yeah, and then hold on one second, because then Phil has his hand up too. Just want to make sure I got that out there.
Okay.
So, can I go or should Phil go
Go
first?
ahead, Renee. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead, Renee.
You know, being in the military and a few other organizations I won't even get into, there's a difference between defending yourself, okay, or retaliating. In this case, Lucifer was retaliating against something he didn't like. He retaliated with bad stuff. To defend yourself if somebody's physically attacking you, we wasn't talking about a physical attack in heaven. It was a spiritual, verbal, not verbal, but mental attack. Not even an attack. It was a situation that came up. Lucifer's resolve was to retaliate.
Okay,
And
go.
that's what he did.
Yes. Okay, go ahead,
Thank you. Thank you.
Phil.
Yeah, so this is a wonderful discussion. It's deep and it's just a lot of thoughts are just firing up in my brain. And I'm just trying to put some perspective here together. So loving yourself, I believe there is a statement by Ellen White. I don't know where it's at, but I believe there's a statement when she said that when we resurrect, we'll have a new body, yes, but our stature is not going to all be the same. So I'm 5'6". I mean, I think there's all, eventually, I don't know if she said this, but I think eventually we're all going to have similar height, similar stature, physical stature. I mean, if, I don't know, but I do know that she said somewhere that we are going to rise up physically, even though with a new body, as we are. So if you're 5'6" like I am, you're gonna rise up as 5'6". And I have often thought of, and she said that, Adam was what, 16 feet tall. That's twice over, that's almost that is 3 times my height. And if I didn't love myself, I could only imagine that, because it says, love casts out fear, right? So if I didn't love myself, I would be very fearful standing next to Adam or anybody, of that stature. And, this fast brain, slow brain, fight, flight, or freeze, where would my brain be at that point if I didn't love myself? It's like, here's me, puny ant standing next to Adam. And that's just one thought about, love, the love that casts out fear, loving yourself. And, Lucifer, did Lucifer, did they really love themselves, Lucifer? Because I would have to say no. If they were really love themselves, Lucifer, they would be totally, completely satisfied, content, joyful of their stature, who they are, right? So I would have to say Lucifer didn't love themselves. So that's another thought. And the other thought is compare and contrast Lucifer with Michael. You know, earlier I asked that question, did Lucifer ever, go to the Father? And Michael being God, yet the archangel, equal with Lucifer. You know, if Lucifer was tested, then was Michael tested? And that's just another question. And Christ being God, descending or condescending to be an angel, equal with another creation, was that a parable of a test? And condescending even more to be a human being, was that another test? I mean, way back when, from the foundation of the world. Right? So because Lucifer was tested, so here we see Christ's humility all the way down from God to archangel, a created being, to another created being, human being. That's another test. So, all these thoughts are just, like I said, firing in my mind. And it's, I think this is a wonderful discussion. And thank you.
Thank you. So just to wrap up, in closing, I'm just going to leave us with a scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4-7. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Thank you. Can someone close in prayer?
Actually, can I add one comment before we close?
Sure.
So it occurred to me that Lucifer wanted to protect self, not love self.
Interesting.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that thought. Can I have someone pray to close?
Susan, would you like to close in prayer?
Okay.
Thank you.
Dear Heavenly God, we thank you so much, Lord, for this blessed gathering, for the beautiful, beautiful quotes that Victoria provided to give us a platform, Lord, for which to discuss this great topic. It's a wonderful topic, Lord, and we're all thankful for this timely and wonderful study. Lord, we ask that you continue to work on our characters. Please don't let any of us fail, for we know, Lord, you have those waymarks, just like breadcrumbs, on a path before us. If we follow that path, it'll take us all the way home. Continue to help us grow closer to one another, Lord, where we can truly share personal aspects of ourselves and our experiences with each other, where we can confide, Lord, with trust, because we can't have love without trust, and we can't have love without faith, Lord. And you're showing that to us through our relationships. And I hope that as we are strengthening, I know we're all working on strengthening our relationships, Lord, where you have us planted in this world, in our respective homes and neighborhoods. But also help us, Lord, on this platform. It can be sometimes difficult because we can't see body language, we can't see expressions of people talking. We don't always know exactly where they're coming from, but we're working on it. And we really want to have that relationship with one another, Lord, so that we can be bonded truly and be delightful to you. So continue, Lord, to teach us, embrace us with all your wonderful heavenly qualities, and continue to give us hope for the future, Lord. Even though at times things do seem hopeless in many ways, we have hope in you, an everlasting hope. And we thank you that love never fails. And I just want to say a special prayer for each one here, Lord, and for their personal struggles in their lives. Lord, may we each become victorious over our struggles. And again, once again, thank you to Victoria for this wonderful study. And thank you for listening to this prayer. And I just pray all this in Jesus' name. Thank you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Susan.